Ever look at something and feel, deep down, it didn't fit on this earth anymore? Like the world had chewed it up and spat it back out, and even God had turned his face away? That's what she saw that morning. It was mid-July, the kind of heat that makes a porch board creak under your heel and makes the air shake like it's hiding secrets. Last night's storm had tossed the valley and then slipped off before dawn, but the dust it kicked up still hung there, thick as smoke. Everything was still. Too still. Clare stepped out to check the break in her fence. Wind had snapped a post clean and tossed wire into the weeds. She meant to count the damage, maybe curse the weather, then get on with the chores. Instead, she saw him. Or rather, she noticed a shape near the far edge of her land, one she first took for a brush pile. Then she saw the boots, torn. Then a shirt ripped to threads, like it had been dragged across the world and back. A body lay face down in the grit, not moving. Her first thought, a dead stranger, a drifter caught in the storm and thrown here by chance. Her second thought was worse, the kind of thought that tells you to turn around and lock your door. But there, in the middle of all that hot quiet, her gut spoke louder than fear. Go look. This land had held her for 20 years. She'd watched it flood and burn and bloom again. She'd lost a husband here, thrown from a horse during a cattle run, his neck gone wrong in one snap. She'd waved goodbye to neighbors who packed wagons, and she'd buried more animals than she cared to count. She wasn't afraid of bodies. She was afraid of what long, hard loneliness does to a person's soul. When she reached him, she saw blood dried into his hairline, brown and crusted. His knuckles were split, scabbed, and ground with dirt. Fine dust packed so deep into his skin, it seemed he'd turned to stone. His chest moved barely. He was alive, but hanging by a thread. Clare knew the warnings. Papers in town talked about thieves on the old trails, men with hollow eyes who would cut you for a slice of bread. Headlines preached fear, fugitives, robbers, worse. The voice in her head told her to walk away. She didn't. She slid her hands under his arms and hauled, one boot scrape at a time. She swore and prayed in the same breath, while sweat ran into her eyes and stung. She dragged him up the steps, across the porch, and into the front room. She laid him on the couch her husband used to nap on after lunch, back when the house still had a tune to it, back when the clock ticked in time with laughter. She didn't know his name. All she knew was the way he gripped at life, even in his sleep. It didn't feel like a random drifter blown in from a storm. It felt like a story with edges she couldn't see yet. She fetched water from the pump, set bandages to boil, wiped the sweat and blood from his brow, and waited. She waited for him to open his eyes, or for him to slip away without a sound. She knew both were possible. Hours stretched thin. The kettle hissed like a snake on the stove. Wind pressed the walls and made the old boards mutter. When he finally woke, she didn't see just a man. She saw a storm-wearing skin. He didn't speak for a long time. He lay there with half-closed eyes, breathing in a slow, rough way, like each breath cost him a coin he could barely afford. Clare sat across from him, hands folded at her lap, yarn and needles resting there to make it look like she was busy. She wasn't. She watched him the way a hawk watches a shadow on the ground, half curious, half ready. Time felt like taffy melting in the sun. At last, when the sky began to bruise orange, he spoke. "Where am I?" The words scraped like gravel. It sounded like he hadn't used his voice in days. "You're in my house," she said, calm and steady. "Carson, Nevada. You came out of that dust like a ghost hunting a place to die." He blinked slow, eyes cloudy with confusion. She gave him a chipped mug and watched him drink, as if it were the first clean water he'd known in a long while. Then she asked the question that had been chewing on her hours now. "What's your name?" He paused. His voice dropped to a softer place. "Jack." A beat. Just Jack. No last name. No story. Just a word that hung in the room like smoke. He tried to push himself up, then flinched and grabbed at his ribs. Instinct pulled Clare to her feet. She'd patched up colts kicked in the corral and steers gored on wire. She had sure hands. While she checked the bandage wrap, she saw his palms up close, calluses and old scars. Not only the kind that comes from hard work, but the kind that comes from bad nights and worse company. "You got enemies out there?" she asked, eyes still on the bruising across his side. Another pause. "Don't we all?" Not the answer she wanted. The one she expected. The room went quiet again, except for the whir of cicadas outside, sawing at the heat like they meant to split it open. The world didn't care what was happening inside that small farmhouse. But Clare cared. And as the horizon darkened, she knew one thing clear. Whatever storm Jack had walked from, it was not done with him. Not yet. Morning showed no mercy. The sun rose quick and mean, flattening the land in bright heat and turning every blade of grass crisp and thin. Clare stepped onto the porch with her coffee. It was the same view she'd stared at every day since her husband died. Fence, field, far hills. But her skin prickled before she saw why. A shape. A horse. Then a man. Slim Harper. He rode slow. The kind of slow that makes your gut lurch. His hat was stained with sweat and dust. His grin was the color of bad tobacco. Slim had always circled Clare like a stray dog that didn't know when to leave a porch alone. Today, the grin wasn't for flirting. He leaned forward on his saddle horn and cut his eyes toward the door. "Well, well," he said, spitting dust. "Got yourself company now, huh?" Behind her, the screen door creaked. Jack stood there, still bruised, still healing, but upright and too steady for a man who'd been half dead the day before. His shirt hung open over the wrappings. The wind tugged at him, as if it wanted to keep him outside. Slim's grin faded. His eyes sharpened. "Damn. Thought I knew that face." Clare's fingers tightened around her mug. Slim spat again, louder this time. "You're the cuss from Arizona, ain't you? The bar shooting. For dead. Then you up and vanished. Posters had your face all over the territory." He squinted hard. "I figured you were a ghost." Jack stepped forward with the slow power of thunder before rain. "I ain't the man they're after," he said, voice low. "But if you came to start something, best start it now." Slim's mouth twitched, like he wanted to smirk and couldn't. He didn't climb down. He didn't draw. He jerked his reins and wheeled his horse, kicking up grit as he rode off fast, as if the devil might grab him if he stayed a second longer. Clare didn't say a word, but in that quiet, the ground between them shifted. She still didn't know who Jack truly was. She knew this. He was done running. And if trouble came, it would not find his back. "If you're still here, friend, I figure that says something. Maybe this kind of tale sits close to the bone. Maybe you've known a Jack. Maybe you've been one. If this story has kept your boots planted and your coffee going cold, I'd be grateful if you hit subscribe, because there's more ahead, and what's coming won't be quiet." By noon the heat was heavier than a wet coat. Dust floated in sheets. Clare pegged the last clean sheet to the line when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Not one horse. 3. Slim had returned, with company. 2 hard-looking boys rode in beside him. Both had the look of men who hadn't seen a soft bed in months. One carried a scar that curled down his neck like a hookworm. The other tapped the butt of his pistol with 2 fingers, like he couldn't wait for an excuse. Clare stepped off the porch, wiped her hands on her apron, and stood square. "What do you want, Slim?" Her voice didn't shake. Slim gave a lazy smile. "Just passing through," he said. "Thought we'd say howdy. Maybe ask your guest a few more questions." Jack came into the doorway. No shirt now, just linen wraps, purple bruises, and a look in his eyes that could shave steel. The air thickened. Scarneck grinned and edged a step closer. "Man, like you don't get to hide out here," he said. "People in Arizona still whisper your name like it's a curse." That was the wrong thing to say. Jack moved so fast it blurred. The thud of a fist, the sound of breath pushed out, a boot to the gut. The third man folded and hit the dirt groaning, face swelling already. Slim's hand twitched toward his gun. Clare beat him by a mile. She didn't lift her voice. She didn't flinch. She reached behind the door and cocked the old shotgun. The sound cracked louder than thunder. Slim froze. His hand hung there, then fell. Jack stepped close enough that Slim had to look him in the eye. "Tell the rest what you saw," Jack said, steady as stone. "Tell him I ain't hiding. And I ain't running." Slim gave one tight nod and spat. He turned his horse and backed away slow, the way a dog does when it gets caught with its nose in a larder. The two boys followed, one holding his gut and swearing under his breath. Evening crept in on soft feet. Just after dark, another rider came. This one had a badge. The sheriff tied off at the post and walked up slow, hat in hand. He carried a folded paper. Official seal. He didn't cross the sill until Clare stepped aside. He offered the paper to Jack. Jack read, jaw clenched, then passed it to Clare. "Wrong man has been running," the sheriff said. "We got the real one in a cell now." He tapped the page. "This says you pulled a woman out during that bar shooting. Took a bullet doing it. Witness says you kept pressure on her wound while folks hid. That's why she's alive." Clare didn't speak. She reached for Jack's hand, squeezed once, and didn't let go. Something in the air loosened that night. A storm had burned itself out. But you could feel another kind. Building, quiet, different, like rain that feeds roots instead of tearing fences down. Dawn came with no wind and birdsong that made the empty yard feel less hollow. The smell of coffee rolled through the room. Jack sat on the porch step with a small block of wood and a knife, shaving curls that fell like feathers. He worked them into the shape of a tiny horse. Clare stepped out, shawl around her shoulders, hair loose in a way she hadn't worn it in years. They didn't speak at first. Some words are best left inside the chest. After a while, Jack looked up. His voice was calm, but underneath it ran something steady, like a river after flood season. "I've been running too long," he said, chasing something that wasn't true. He slid a hand into his pocket and brought out a small silver ring. It had scratches and dents, but it was honest. He held it in his palm like an offering. "I don't have much, but I've got my word. And I've got you if you'll have me." Clare didn't cry. She'd used up most of those tears on nights people forgot about. She smiled instead, soft, worn, and bright in a quiet way. Her smile carried storms and sun with it. "Come inside, Jack," she whispered. "You're home now." And just like that, the dust outside felt lighter. The house felt less empty. It wasn't a fairy tale. The bad in the world hadn't packed up and left. But what they had was real, and it was theirs. People forget that kind of ending can still happen. When life rubs you raw for too long, you think the only choice is to run. Maybe the truth is simpler. Sometimes you stop. You plant your feet in the dirt where you stand. You let something good take root. If this story stirs anything in you, take a moment and say so. What would you have done if you were Clare? Would you bring a broken man with a good heart into your home, or send him on? Is love at 40 still brave? Is redemption real even if it shows up late? Tell us below. We read every single word. And if you want more tales like this, stories with grit, second chances, and hearts that won't quit, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and hang around. The West still has more to say. Ever lay eyes on something and think, clear as day, it didn't belong here anymore? Like the world had chewed it to pieces and spit it back into the dirt? That's what she saw that morning. Smack in the middle of July, when heat makes the porch boards complain and the air wobbles like it's hiding secrets. Last night's storm had pushed through and left a brown haze hanging over everything. The land was still. Too still. Clare stepped out to look at the fence the wind had torn, ready to count busted wire and broken posts. Then she spotted it. No, him, down by the edge of her pasture. Face in the dust. Boots shredded. Shirt ripped clean to ribbons, like he'd been dragged across the desert and tossed aside. He didn't move. First thought, a dead drifter, caught in the storm and dropped here by bad luck. Second thought, something worse. But her gut told her to walk closer. This land had been hers for 2 long decades. She'd lost a husband to a stampede, 1 hard fall, 1 bad break. She'd waved off neighbors who hitched wagons for greener places. She'd dug more graves for animals than she could name. Clare didn't scare easy at the sight of a body. What scared her was what years of silence do to a person's heart. Up close she saw dried blood along his hairline and dust pressed into his skin like it meant to live there. His knuckles were torn and rough, and his chest rose so faint she had to stare to catch it. Alive. Barely. The papers warned folks about men on the trails, thieves, runaways, killers. The headlines screamed it. Still, Clare did what most in town would never do. She hooked her hands under his arms and hauled, 1 dragging boot at a time, sweat stinging her eyes, while she cursed and prayed in the same breath. She pulled him onto her porch, into her front room, and laid him on the couch where her husband used to nap after chores, back when the house still held a little music. She didn't know his name. She only knew the way he clung to life. It didn't feel like random luck. It felt like the middle of a story. She brought water, boiled bandages, wiped his brow. Then she waited. Maybe he'd wake. Maybe he'd slip away without another sound. The kettle hissed. The wind shouldered the walls. Time pulled long and thin. When he finally opened his eyes, she didn't just see a man. She saw a storm with a man's face. He kept quiet for hours. Lay there half-lidded and breathing like it cost him $1 a breath. Clare sat across from him with knitting in her lap to look busy, but her eyes never left him. She watched him the way a hawk tracks a shape on the ground, curious and cautious at once. As the sky turned the color of burning peaches, he spoke. "Where am I?" The words were dry and scratchy, like they'd rusted inside him. "You're in my house," Clare said, steady as a fence post. "Carson, Nevada. You came out of the dust like a ghost looking for a place to die." His blink was slow, confused. She handed him a chipped cup. He drank like the water was the only honest thing he'd tasted in days. "What's your name?" she asked after a quiet spell. He let the silence stretch. "Jack," he said at last. "Just Jack. No last name. No story offered. Just that single word hanging between them." He tried to sit, winced, and grabbed his side. Clare moved without thinking. She'd patched horses with worse injuries. While she checked the wrap, she noticed his hands. Thick calluses. Old scars. Not just work scars, other kinds too. "You got enemies out there," she said, eyeing the bruises on his ribs. Another pause. "Don't we all?" Not helpful. Exactly what she expected. The cicadas outside hummed like a saw. The world turned without caring what happened inside that small house. But Clare cared. And she knew this much. Whatever storm Jack had escaped, it was still chasing him. The next day the sun came up mean and hot, baking the yard brittle. Clare took her coffee to the porch like always. Same view she'd stared at since her husband died. But her neck prickled. Then she saw why. One rider coming slow. Slim Harper. He moved with the kind of slow that makes your stomach twist. Hat stained by sweat. Teeth the color of old straw. Slim had always hovered around Clare like a stray dog that didn't know better. Today the grin on his face wasn't for charm. He leaned on his saddle horn and cut his eyes toward her door. "Well now," he said, spitting dust. "Got yourself company?" Behind Clare, the screen door creaked. Jack stood there, bruised, wrapped in bandages, shirt hanging open, but upright, steady. The breeze tugged at him like it wanted to keep him outside. Slim's grin fell off. "I know that face," he muttered. Clare tightened her grip on the mug. "You're the fella from Arizona, ain't ya?" Slim said louder. "That bar mess. For dead. Vanished right after. They plastered your picture on every post from here to the border. Thought you were a ghost." Jack stepped onto the porch, calm as a storm right before it breaks. "I ain't the man you're hunting," he said. "But if you came here to stir trouble, go ahead." Slim's cheek twitched. He didn't dismount, didn't draw. He jerked the reins and kicked out in a hurry, riding like he was afraid of the ground behind him. Clare said nothing, but the distance between her and Jack changed. She didn't know his whole past. She did know this: he wasn't running anymore. If trouble showed up, it would meet his eyes, not his back. If you're still listening, that tells me the story's got you. Maybe you've known a man like Jack. Maybe you've been him. If your coffee's gone cold while you've been standing here with us, hit that subscribe. More's on the way, and the quiet is about to end. By midday, the air felt like warm wool on the skin. Clare pinned the last sheet to the line when the sound came again. Hoofbeats. Not one horse. 3. Slim had returned. Brought help. 2 rough-looking riders flanked him. One wore a scar that curved down his neck. The other kept his fingers drumming the grip of his pistol, hungry for an excuse. Clare stepped off the porch and wiped her hands on her apron. "What do you want, Slim?" she asked, voice flat. Slim's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just passing through," he said. "Figured we'd tip our hats. Maybe ask your guest a couple more questions." Jack moved into the doorway, bare-chested under the linen wraps, bruises shining purple, eyes cold and focused. The air tightened like a rope. Scarneck took a step closer, showing teeth. "Man like you don't get to hide out here," he said. "Back in Arizona, folks still say your name soft, like it's bad luck to say it loud." "Wrong move." Jack shot forward. One fist, one boot, one breath. And the third rider folded like a busted chair, wheezing in the dirt with his face already swelling. Slim snatched for his gun. Clare was faster. She didn't raise her voice, didn't blink. She reached behind the door and snapped the shotgun back. The clack hit like thunder. Slim froze. His hand hovered, then dropped to his side. Jack stepped in close enough for Slim to smell the dust on him. "Tell the rest what happened here," he said, voice quiet and sharp. "Tell him I ain't hiding. And I ain't running." Slim spat once, eyes hard, and backed away slow. The 2 riders helped the third up, and the 3 of them rolled out like dogs caught stealing meat. Night came, and with it the sheriff. He tied off his horse, climbed the steps with his hat in his hands, and showed a folded paper with a seal pressed into it. He didn't cross the threshold until Clare stepped aside. The sheriff offered the paper to Jack. Jack read it through, jaw tight, then passed it to Clare. "Wrong man's been on the run," the sheriff said. "We got the real one in irons. And this here says you pulled a woman behind a table that day. Kept pressure on her wound. Took a bullet for it." He tapped the page. "That's why she's still breathing." Clare didn't speak. She reached out, took Jack's hand, and held on. Something in the air eased. One storm ended. Another kind, gentler, moved in. Morning broke with birds and the smell of coffee, not wind and grit. Jack sat on the top step, whittling a small horse from a block of wood. Shavings piled like pale curls. Clare came out in her shawl, hair unpinned for the first time in years. They kept quiet a while. Some things don't need words. Then Jack looked up. Under his steady voice you could hear something new, like a river after the floods have gone. "I've been running a long time," he said, "chasing a life that didn't fit. He reached into his pocket and brought out a small silver ring, nicked and scuffed, but honest. He set it in his palm and held it toward her. "I don't have much," he said. "I have my word. And I have you if you'll take me." Clare didn't cry. Those tears had been spent on old nights with no witnesses. She smiled. Soft. Tired in a good way. Strong. "Come inside, Jack," she whispered. "You're home now." Somehow the dust didn't feel so heavy anymore. The house didn't echo the same. It wasn't a fairy tale. Trouble still lived out there on the trails. But what they had was real. The kind of ending people forget is possible. Maybe life isn't always about starting over somewhere new. Maybe sometimes you stop, stand where you are, and let something good take root. If this story shook something loose in you, say so. What would you have done? If you were Clare? Open your door to a broken man with a good heart, or send him on his way. Is love at 40 still brave? Does redemption count even when it shows up late? Drop your thoughts below. We read them all. If you want more grit, more second chances, more hearts that don't quit, hit like, tap subscribe, and stick around. The West still has stories to tell. Some mornings break soft, like the world finally took a breath. This was one of them. No wind, no grit in the teeth, just bird song, and the warm smell of coffee drifting through a house that didn't echo so much anymore. Jack sat on the top step, knife in hand, shaving a block of wood down to a tiny horse. Shavings curled and fell like pale feathers. Clare came out with her shawl around her shoulders, hair loose in a way she hadn't worn it in years. They let the quiet sit between them. Sometimes silence is the truest kind of talk. When Jack finally spoke, his voice carried something steady beneath it, like a river after flood season. "I've been running too long," he said, "chasing a life that didn't fit." He reached into his pocket and brought out a small silver ring, scratched, worn, honest. He opened his palm. "I don't have much. I have my word. And I have you if you'll take me." Clare didn't cry. Those tears were spent long ago on nights no one saw. She smiled instead, soft, tired in a good way, strong in a way that lasts. "Come inside, Jack," she whispered. "You're home now." Somehow the dust outside felt lighter. The rooms felt less empty. It wasn't a fairy tale, and the bad out there hadn't vanished. But what they held between them was real, and it was theirs. People forget that kind of ending is still possible. After life rubs you raw, you think the only option is to keep moving. Maybe the truth is simpler. Stop, stand your ground, and let something good take root where you are. If this story stirred something in you, say so below. What would you have done if you were Clare? Open your door to a broken man with a good heart, or send him on his way. Is love at 40 still brave? Is redemption still redemption when it shows up late? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And if you want more tales with grit, second chances, and hearts that don't quit, hit like, tap subscribe, and stick around. The West still has stories left to tell.